seem to hover by themselves with no visible technology or pole, etc., holding them up. I don't know if I was laying down or standing up because there was a feeling of no gravity or downward force in any direction. I remember interacting with an entity that was human-esque, but seemed to be different, like a beautiful person, but they had no male or female characteristics. Completely androgynous, but with very symmetrical and smooth appearance to the face and body. Otherwise, very human looking. They talked to me, but I was acutely aware that it was in my head and not out loud. It was like moments of being conscious with moments of haziness in between. I don't know really how to describe it. I was aware that they were doing things to me, but I don't remember what. But I do distinctly remember a piercing device they inserted just behind my ear on my right side. It went pretty deep, but it didn't hurt. It just felt almost itchy for a second, and they told me they were taking a sample and depositing something that would allow them to remotely monitor me for some time. They explained that this was not the first time they had done this to me specifically, and that they would continue to do so throughout my life. And that there were literally thousands of people they were doing this to. It was a scientific study of some kind that they tried to explain to me, but I honestly don't remember the purpose. Ew. That's so scary. I was able to ask them a few other things in the moments of being conscious, like, where was my sister? And they explained that she was having the same thing done to her. I asked them point blank if they were aliens, and they found it humorous and told me they were humans from the future. But I got the distinct feeling that this wasn't the truth. Again, I don't know how to describe why I thought this. It was just a different feeling when they told me this versus the other things they were saying. It felt like a lie or simplification of some kind. After some time of being out of it again, I became aware that my body was bathed in blue light again, and the darkness started to recede, and I was able to see the stars and sky again. I don't know how long it was before I really understood where I was, but at some point I sort of came to and realized I was sitting on the grass next to my sister in the neighbor's yard, about 50 to 60 feet from the original spot. My sister came to almost at the same time. We both immediately looked at each other and then to the sky, and the light was gone, but the sun was coming up. It was then we realized it had been hours. We didn't really talk about what happened. We just felt the need to go inside and go to bed before we got in trouble. It was years later before I ever spoke to my sister about that night, and she remembered us seeing a helicopter in the sky and just falling asleep because we were tired. She won't discuss it beyond that. I honestly had forgotten about this event until 2 years ago when my wife mentioned that I had a spot behind my right ear that kind of looked like a burn mark or a scar, but also like a pimple or a mole. She likes to pop things and was dying to let her try to pop it. When she reminded me of it, the memories of the event flooded back into my head, and I was a bit emotional, but agreed to let her mess with it. She tried to pop it, but said nothing came out. It's still there and looks exactly as she describes it. Kind of like a mole, but also kind of like a scar. I've had MRIs and other scans throughout the years, but nothing has ever shown up, so I have no idea what it is, or if anything is inside there. I try to not think of it now because, although I wasn't scared at the time, it is unnerving to think about it now. That's my story as honestly as I remember it. Yep, that sounds like an alien story. Ugh. I don't know where I stand with aliens. I know that alien movies can sometimes, genuinely terrify me if they're done well. So, yeah, these stories are they're gonna give me the creeps. I'll sleep well tonight. Okay, let's move on to the next one. That was a good one. This one is by Appalachian Wind, and it starts, first time I ever tried to write this down, first time telling anyone outside the family. I'm leaving out time and location and some other details because I'm still scared of what might happen with it publicly, I guess. Summer before 8th grade, me and 2 of my friends snuck out at midnight to go walk around the neighborhood and go see these girls on the next block who were having a sleepover. Classic. We turn a corner in our neighborhood and there's this huge black blimp-shaped thing in the sky, like the pictures of the Hindenburg, but bigger than that and as close, if not closer. Completely silent and the size of at least 4 to 5 football fields across. No exaggeration, even though I was young. We stare at it, entranced, asking each other over and over again if we see it, which we all agree that we do, standing there, frozen in place. It's like black, polished gunmetal, no lights, no sound, no anything. It's just hovering there. This has always scared me more than any sort of possible abduction scenario. That there were others, and we're all voluntarily suffering a sort of collective amnesia. Except in somehow we're not. I've thought about hypnosis, but that has scared me too. Plus, I'm not sure if I trust the results. I was just a kid then, and I'm not sure if I could trust the hypnotist. What I do know, again, is that there's no way it was just the three of us who saw it. We're talking a huge thing hovering in the sky directly above thousands of houses just after midnight on a summer weekend night. But nothing on the news, nothing in the paper, nothing on TV, no word spoken about it ever by anyone. This is my story. I'm a little older than the average person around here, I think, but I know what creepypasta and stuff like that is. This happened, and there's no way I'm the only one who remembers it. No way. Thanks for letting me get that off my chest. Whew. That was a good one. I don't know. Anyone out there have a similar experience to that? That would be interesting. Okay, there's a lot of replies to that one, but let's just get to the next one. Okay, so this next one, the username is now deleted, and they start, my mom tells a story of her and her friends. Let's call her friend Lisa. When my mom and Lisa were teenagers, they were up on the roof of Lisa's house, and they see a bright light in the sky. Next thing they know, the light is gone. Thing is, they think they've been on the roof for like 15 minutes, but something like 3 hours passed. Mom doesn't remember anything about what happened during that time, and Lisa simply refuses to talk about it. She would answer my mom with things like, I don't know, and just drop it for a long time. So a couple months later, Mom moves away and loses contact with Lisa for about 10 years. She finally meets up with her again and immediately notices that something is odd about Lisa. Lisa appeared very distant to her, with a very dreamy demeanor, like she was really happy and at peace for no good reason. After they talk for a bit, Lisa brings up the incident on the roof. Mom says she still doesn't remember anything about it, but Lisa remembers. She remembers everything. She said that at first it was all in bits and pieces, and she couldn't remember any of it clearly. She was confused and scared and wanted to avoid discussing it. Then, as time passed, she began to remember more of it. She remembers it all clearly, and she remembers the other 3 times she was abducted after that clearly as well. At first, they paralyzed her somehow and did all sorts of invasive treatments on her, but by the most recent time, they stopped probing her and began to talk with her. They didn't speak English or any other human language, but she could understand everything they said, even though she couldn't speak their Mom inquires what the truth is, Lisa just says that you will know eventually. And she says that once she learned of the truth, then everything became wonderful. Mom has seen her a few more times over the years. We still live in another state from her, and she apparently has a pretty normal life and doesn't obsess over alien stuff. She only ever brings it up in passing, not like it's a central part of her daily life. Interesting. Very interesting. So got to the nearest intersection, I looked at the signs which read 350 north and 50 west. I was half a mile away from my car, which was just right off the main road. I started walking toward the headlights I could see on the main road. I can't say how long it took me to walk the half mile, but it couldn't have been more than 10 to 15 minutes. When I arrived at my car, all the lights were out. My battery had died, which struck me as odd because I couldn't have been gone for that long. I looked at my phone, which was sitting on the passenger seat, and the time was 2:17 a.m. Over 3 hours had passed since I turned off onto the side road for the flashing lights behind me. I remember sitting in my car, completely dumbfounded, wondering what the heck had just happened to me. After about half an hour of just sitting there, I remembered that my battery was dead. So I got on the phone and called AAA to come out and give me a jump. It took about an hour for them to get out to me since I was a good distance away from the nearest town, during which time I just sat in silence, running through the possible scenarios in my head concerning what had just happened. To this day, I couldn't tell you what really happened to me that night. All I know is I can't think of any plausible explanation as to why I woke up over half a mile away from my car in the middle of a cornfield more than 3 hours after I had stopped. I've only shared this story with one other person, my uncle. I am sure people would either look at me like I'm crazy, or they would say that I'm making the whole story up. And I can't blame them. If somebody came to me with a story like that, that so closely mirrors the stereotypical encounter story, I probably wouldn't believe them either. Well, no, that's... Some people are speculating, like, early episode of, or like the first episode of, like, a mental illness or something going on there. And they say that they haven't had any episodes like that previously, nor have had any since. Interesting. Alright, that was a good one. Very scary. I would have been freaked out if my car started doing that, and then on those pitch black roads in rural areas with, like, alone. Yeah. Alright, let's read one more. Okay, this last one is by my SHIT is perfect. And they give some backstory, essentially saying that the story isn't theirs but their dad's. So they start by saying, so my dad was in his teens and weird UFO stuff has been happening his whole life at this point. He's out in his driveway for whatever reason, doing whatever people do when they live in a woodsy rural area. His parents aren't home, they're out shopping, at work, whatever. Suddenly, this big black car pulls into his driveway, tinted windows, completely black. My dad just kind of watches it pull in, not sure what to think. Something to remember here. Not only is this a rural area, but it's about 50 years ago. People were a lot more trusting back then. Nowadays, you'd be crazy noticed right away. The door opens and out steps a super tall, fair-faced white man. He has blonde hair, an extremely well-tailored black suit, and black sunglasses on. Matrix. Right away, my dad could see there was something off about him. He looks too perfect. Flawless skin, a childlike smile, and very overdressed for a hot summer day. He looks distinctly out of place. The man walks up to my dad and asks for his name. My dad, around 15 at the time, asks him why he wants to know. The man smiles and explains that he just wants to ask him a few questions, and he means no harm. Bemused, my dad agrees, but he's still wary of this strange man. First, the tall white dude asks my dad if he lives there. My dad says yes, and asks why he wants to know. The man has a completely relaxed, non-confrontational tone, and seems almost giddy, like he was really excited to be having this conversation with my dad. His childlike, overzealous grin hadn't faded in the least. He asked my dad if he had seen, felt, or heard anything that he thought was out of the ordinary. My dad said sometimes, and asked again why he wanted to know. The man just kept grinning, and by now my dad was feeling pretty comfortable. He had never seen this guy before in his life. He didn't appear to be any kind of government agent. His behavior was far too unusual. Suddenly, the man's demeanor completely changes. His grin disappears, and he looks worried. Without so much as a goodbye, he opens his car door, gets inside, and drives away, still making no noise at all. A couple minutes later, my dad's parents come back from shopping. Now, for the really weird part. My mom saw the same dude 30 years later. She was in a bookstore looking to buy something. Don't know the details really. When she turned around and noticed this tall, fair-looking blonde guy in a black suit sitting at a table in the cafe, 30 feet or so from my mom. He was reading a newspaper. Sitting across from him was another dude, dressed exactly the same as the blonde one. They still looked strangely out of place, somehow too perfect, too clean. Now, my mom had heard this story from my dad before, and she actually recognized my dad's description of this man. He definitely stood out. So she's kind of taken aback, trying to figure out if it's actually the man my dad had seen all those years ago. The blonde guy notices my mom looking at him. Again, his demeanor completely changes. He stands up, turns around, and quickly walks out of the bookstore with the second guy right behind him. What the heck, right? I'm actually freaking out a bit about this. I'm 22 now, and I have to wonder if I'm going to run into this awkward blonde stalker. It's like the Men in Black sent their most inept agent to follow around my dad. Or the most obvious alien ever is trying to study my family in our natural habitat. I don't know. I know this is all very vague. I'm going were some good stories. Some pretty classic alien stories. That last one was interesting. Yeah, I don't have much to say on aliens. What do y'all think? Sometimes they can genuinely creep me out. I think the first scary alien movie I ever saw was Signs, and that scared me for a long, long time. I watched that movie when I was very little, and it really stuck with me. That scene with the alien walking through. Yeah, not the greatest. But other than that, I think the only other movie that has scared me, like genuinely, Signs, and I think it's called The Fourth Kind, which at the time was like, this is a true story. It's not, but I think that component is primarily what made it like super, super scary. Yeah, but it's not real. So that's what I would always fall back on in scary movies to comfort myself when I was little, is this isn't real. So when they were stories claiming to